Salvete omnes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back as we work our way through Caesar's Gallic Wars. We are still trying to land in Britain. We are struggling to get from the boats. Last time we did 425. A standard bearer, or the standard bearer of the 10th Legion, has jumped out of the water, or jumped down into the water from the boat, which has compelled the rest of his companions to follow suit, because you protect the standard at all cost. And so we've started to get this wave, right? He jumps down, and then the people on his boat jump down, and then the people on the nearest boats, they start to jump down when they see this happening, and it just kind of carries onward. And so we pick up in 426. Pugnantum est ab utrisque acriter. Period. Look at that. Very short, simple sentence. This is not uncommon for Caesar. This particular phrase, what we're going to have here, he's made it passive, which is perhaps a bit weird, a bit unusual. Pugnantum est. It was fought ab utrisque, by each side, or by either, fiercely. He easily could have said both sides fought fiercely or something like that, but he's made it passive, and Caesar will do this quite frequently. He'll do it with intransitive verbs a lot. Instead of saying they arrived at London or something, he will say it was it was arrived at London. So he'll do these kind of weird passives, and so you just kind of get that here. It was fought by each side fiercely. Acriter. Nostri tamen, quod neque ordine servare, neque firmiter insistera, neque signa subsequi poterant, atque alius alia ex navi, quibus cumque signis occurrerat, se aggregabat, Magdopera perturbabantur, semicolon. I'm just going to pause at the semicolon because I don't want to read the whole rest of that sentence, which is just as long as that. So, nostri tamen. Our men, however, again emphasizing Caesar never says us, he says our men, because he is just a typical Roman. Quod. We get because, and then we get three different neques. So we get this broken down. Because to save or to kind of keep their ranks, to kind of stand firmly, and to signa subsequi, to follow their standards, poterant, they were not able to do these things. So because they were not able to protect their ranks or kind of keep their rows, and were not able to stand firmly, and were not able to follow their standards, and because, so the quote here going with the neque, going with poterant, and then also going with aggregabat, and because we get this alias alia, different people from different ships, alias ex navi. So a couple of different ways to translate this. I think your book will give you a couple of choices at the bottom, or a good way of doing it, but something like each man was kind of gathering from other ships, each man from each ship, or a different guy from a different boat, was running to aggregabat. He was literally like joining himself to whatever standards he ran across. So I did that about as well as the Roman army is arranging itself here. So let me try again to make that more clear. So because our men weren't able to kind of do the typical things they do, and because everyone from every boat, or because different people from different boats were flocking to whatever standards they met, magnopera perturbabantur, they were greatly They were greatly perturbed. They were greatly confused. They were greatly disordered, something like that. So normally when the Romans are going to jump out of boats, you're going to have this nice, or not when they jump out of boats, when they get ready for battle, you're going to have these nice orderly rows, right? You're going to have this nice column of soldiers that marches in a nice perfect square or rectangle. And then this group is going to do the same thing, and this group's going to do the same thing. And it's nice and orderly, and each person is following his own standard. What's happening here, though, is they're not able to kind of get into the rows that they're used to doing. They're not able to follow their standards. And so people are jumping out of boats. Everybody's jumping out of a different boat. And whatever standards they happen to see, they are flocking to. They are running to. So if you're part of the 10th Legion and you jump out of the boat, maybe you can't find the 10th Legion standard, but you see, oh, there's the 8th Legion, I'm going to go over there. And so you get people going to whatever standard happens to be closest to them. It may not be their normal standard, but it's like, I must protect all the standards. This is the closest one to me. I'm going to do that. So there's a lot of confusion at this point. Hostes vero, so that's nostri tamen. Hostes vero, notis omnibus vadii, ubiquex litera aliquo singularis ex navia gradientes conspexerant, incitantis equis impeditos ad aurea bantur. Plures paucos circum sistebant, ali ablater aperto in universos tela cuiciebant. Let me double check something, because I think there's a typo in this text, because the grammar wasn't making sense to me as I was reading. Sorry, what am I at? 426. Yeah. This should be wadis, not wadi-e. So, because it's an ablative absolute, right? And so we need all these to be ablatives. So, vero, but. So in contrast, Armen. Armen, however, are doing this, but, or in truth, the enemy, ablative absolute, with all of the shallows, with all of the wading areas known. I'm going to go with when here. Where? Either. Both work. When they had caught sight from the shore, so they're standing out on the shore, when they, from the shore, caught sight of some people, some Romans, some of our men, jumping out individually from a boat, or disembarking from a boat, with their horses spurred on, they rose up, they rose up against those impeded people, those hindered people. So, I'll do that again. So, I think you can make this when or where. When they caught sight from the shore, our men jumping down one by one from the boats, they rose up against those people being hindered with their own horses kind of spurred on. I think you could also say where they caught sight of people jumping down from the boats, they rose up against them. Yeah, I would go with either. I don't think I can make a case for either one, at least not without going deeper into what does ubi truly mean. So I would go with when or where. I tend to go with when it's not being used as kind of a relative pronoun. So when they caught sight of this, they rose up against our men having been hindered, and they rose up, another ablative absolute, with their horses spurred on. So the enemy catch a sight of our men jumping down from the boats one by one as singulars. They rose up against our men. Several of them, plures, hostes, several were surrounding few of our men. So you'd have lots of the enemy were standing around few people, so not a good situation. Some of them from the open flank were throwing spears into the mass, into the group, into the universal Roman army, something like that, right? So again, not good. So several people are surrounding a few, and some of them are throwing spears from the open flank, from the exposed flank, into the whole group in Universos. All right. Quod cum animad vertiset Caesar, scaphas langarum navium, item speculatoria navigia militibus complere usit, et quos laborantes conspexerat, his subsidia submittebat. All right, so relatively short sentence here. This is similar to how 5 began, right? It's a very similar phrase. He's only really just kind of changed the word order a little bit and changed it into a cum clause rather than ubi. So which thing, that is everything that I've just mentioned, when Caesar had noticed it, he does something to the skiffs, the kind of like the lifeboats of the longboats. So scaphos are like, they'd be like a lifeboat, I guess. They are skiffs, the rafts of the longboats. The longboats, so the rafts. He ordered these rafts to be filled, passive infinitive. To be filled, militibus, ablative of means, to be filled with soldiers. And likewise, he ordered the speculatoria navigia to be filled with soldiers. So he ordered the lifeboats of the long ships, of like the kind of cargo ships, to be filled with soldiers. Likewise, the kind of scouting boats to be filled with soldiers. So right now, all the soldiers are on like these big transport ships, which are big and clunky and hard to move. But in this case, we are worried. He wants lighter, quicker, easier to maneuver boats. So these scaphos from the kind of transport ships and the scouting boats, these would be, 2-point. These would be in battleship. These would be like the little 2-point boats. Here, them to be filled with soldiers. And you get a relative clause here. The antecedent is his to some extent, but also kind of laborantes is included within the relative clause as an antecedent. So, to these people whom he caught sight of struggling, he sent these things, he sent these boats as aids. So he sent kind of supports to these people whom he saw struggling, which is hopefully what a good general would do. Oh, those men are struggling. I'm going to go help them out. As opposed to, yep, they're struggling, sucks to be them. Let's go continue to push the advantage on the left side. Nah, I mean, they're kind of struggling all around, so it's really whoever was struggling perhaps the most, he's sending help there. Nostri, simul in arido constiterunt suis omnibus consecutis, in hospites impetum fecarunt, atque eos in fugam dederunt, nec longes prosequi potuerunt, quod equites cursum tenerat qui insulam capra non potuerant. Hoc unum ad pristinum fortunam Caesari defuit, which is a very funny line. It's not supposed to be funny, but it's funny. All right, so let's. It's 2 sentences. We'll chomp it up into 3 different parts. So, nostri, our men, simul in arido constiterunt, suis omnibus consecutis, in hostes impetum fecerunt, atque eos in fugam dederunt. So, our men, as soon as they stood, simul in arido constiterunt, as soon as they stood on dry land, on arid land, with kind of all of their men kind of following consecutis, so with all of their comrades kind of having followed, having caught up, they made an attack against the enemy. And here's in plus the accusative meaning like against. They made an attack against the enemy, and literally, they gave them, the enemy, into flight. Or they put them into flight. So, our men finally get to the dry land. And once kind of everybody's there and gathered up, they make an attack, and they cause the enemy to flee, because you don't mess with the Romans on dry land. In the water, they are terrible. On dry land, they're a force to be reckoned with. In fact, from what I understand about Roman naval battle, it's not so much attack like at a range from ships or anything like that. It's more like ram the opposing ships so that you can jump on there into nice little rows of groups of men and just kind of march over them. So the Romans hate fighting in the water. They're like cats. They would much rather be doing this on dry land. So that's the first part. Our men stood on dry land, and as soon as they stood on dry land, they were able to make an attack against the enemy and put them to flight. Neque longis prosequi potuerunt, quod equites cursum tenera atque insulum capra non poterant. And they were not able to follow very far. Longius is technically a comparative adverb in this case. So they weren't able to follow them too far. They weren't able to follow them any farther, maybe something like that. Kind of up to you how you want to translate that. The idea is they weren't able to follow them very far, right? They're trying to give chase, but they couldn't follow them too far because the cavalry had not been able to hold their course and reach the island. So I believe what's going on here is all of these boats are, he's left with his kind of little naval fleet to cross the channel from France, modern day France, to England. But the cavalry is not able to make it to land. They couldn't hold course to the island. They weren't able to reach the island. They weren't able to kind of like lay hold of the island. And so you can only follow so far on foot, especially when, as we know from previous lines, right? The Britons are in a cavalry and they've got horses and chariots, right? Meanwhile, the Romans are running on foot. So they can't follow them very far because they don't have their own cavalry to chase down those horses. So our men stood on dry land, made an attack against the enemy, put them to flight. They were not able to follow them very far because the cavalry wasn't able to kind of hold their course and reach the island. This one thing, hoc unum, this one thing failed Caesar, or was lacking for Caesar, kind of compared to his previous fortune, his prior fortune. So Caesar has been very lucky. He's been very fortunate. He's been very successful. But darn, the cavalry not able to reach the island in this very small window of time. This one thing, only this, was lacking for Caesar compared to his prior fortunes. So what a shame. If only the cavalry had made it in time, we would all be speaking Latin right now, and he would have taken over the entire world. Shame that was the only thing that held Caesar back. Spoilers, it wasn't. Or at least it won't be. Caesar struggles mightily compared to ad pristinum fortunam, right? Compared to his previous fortune and luck. I mean, he's basically done a pretty good job of taking over most of France, or at least been successful there. Britain, he meets some more struggles than perhaps in previous battles and wars. So we'll go ahead and stop there for today. Thank you very much for joining me. As always, if you have any questions or comments, throw those in the chat. Hit me up during class or email me. Obviously, if you are not a student, then you're going to have to rely upon the comments down below. So feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. Ha! YouTube algorithms, hit me up. And with that, have a great rest of your day. I will see you next time. Later.